inglês. Se em algum momento houver alguma pergunta para explorar e for necessário fazer uma tradução, estejam completamente à vontade, nós fazemos chegar a este lado. So I was just saying that we're going to keep this talk going in English, and if anyone needs translation, I'll relay the information over to this side. Stefan and Krieg, thank you very much for being here. It's our pleasure to welcome you, and I think there's much to learn from this session. I would start by asking for your impressions of the film, and obviously we won't be focusing our talk on the film, but I would like to bridge what we've just seen with maybe what you're doing by highlighting the very brief but I think very on-point statements of Silvia Federici. She is an Italian-born, US-based academic. She was one of the first academics to advocate for women's labor rights. So she was crucial in the acknowledgement or the recognition that there are types of work that are very easily stripped of their value. Certainly domestic work, and I would argue certainly agricultural work. So I think it's very inspiring to see her talk and to see her place the true value in these types of demeaned labor, which are usually manual. And I think it's very inspiring to look at her hands while she's talking, because she indeed seems to have the hands of someone who has toiled the earth. I thought that was particularly mysterious and inspiring, and I don't know if that has sparked any sort of thought or idea. But feel free to comment on whatever you think may bridge the more theoretical plane of thought with what you guys are doing at the Quinta Project.
I think the point about the work is an important one, and I think we see it on a daily basis. So if you think of how much love and care, for example, on a very simple basis, you need to put into a tomato. You care for it for like 6 months or so, and then and eventually something comes out of it. And then this product is at the value of, I don't know, how much would you pay for a single tomato? But very little. And so the value, of course, is very little. But I guess taking up your question of how we can bridge this to what we are doing is that it is an important point to recognize that the system itself, and I think that's also what the movie makes very clear, is a very broken system. And it has a lot of challenges.
A very broken system,
yeah.
Right? Okay. Just trying to get it right.
And so what we really need is something else. But what is this other thing? And I think the Quinta Project, we sort of started as an idea of, I think our first idea was this kind of hybrid eco-village, and this is how we first started, having a kind of a queer place, queer eco-village, that was based not just on a land project, because we recognized that a lot of people, for example, don't have the means, and I think yesterday the talk this also came up. Moving to the countryside needs means. You need to have money or a particular type of work, work arrangements that you can live that life outside of, for example, big cities for many people. And so we wanted to be a sort of an experimental space where people could toy with this idea and try this idea out, and then eventually, hopefully, then commit to the space. And coming, of course, from a very clear perspective. And so we then eventually kind of changed to this, what it is now, which is this eco-queer experimental space. Just clear also what we are doing. And I think what that says in itself, on a sort of practical level, what that means is we are experimenting. And we have this sort of fabulous thing, which is a welcome meeting for everybody who's joining us. So everybody can join. We are an open organization, an open community. And then you basically can partake in some of our pods, which are, a lot of them are online, which are groups which work on different subject matters. So for example, ecofeminism.
Let's not go into that so
okay,
soon.
Good.
Okay, we have a lot to dig into. So
that is good.
If you don't mind, I would like to just ask Quint for a brief comment, and then we can get to the more specific aspects of Quinta. Okay? Sorry.
There you go.
Same question.
First impressions, or
no? Well, it's a super depressing movie. No?
Let's have it.
It's so bad, and there's a piece of Jinwad, the women's village in in North Syria, in between. But you kind of, and it's this beautiful, also probably an experiment. But then the part about fracking comes after, and you kind of, it's like washes over the nice thing that you have just seen. So it's the third time that I see it now, and I'm always like after. But it's true that Silvia Federici says for me, what is very important in what she says is that we put value in the wrong things in the capitalist system. And if we would put more value in the reproductive or the regenerative ways of living, which are doable, it would be a very different world.
Yeah, I think so too. Without wanting to pry too much, I think it would be useful for us, or for me, urbanite, and maybe for the other urbanites in the room, to get a little bit of you guys, your backstories. Because I imagine that environmental awareness and LGBT activism, they coincide at this point in time in your lives, but they didn't really overlap or happen at the exact same time. So if you're willing to share a little bit of your backstories, what has brought you to this place where you are, the founder and manager and a fellow Quinter doing this experience, engaged in a more reparative, restorative practice, which is both linked to farming and to community making, I would say. And correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay, I go first. So for me, I think the journey very much started, I've been very much an urbanite. So I grew up in a very industrial part of Germany, then moved to London, worked in London, a little bit in Brussels, a bit in Barcelona, some time in Hong Kong. And really my original interest was really in queer community. And so I come from a sort of like, how can we create a queer community that's worthwhile being called a community, and sort of not within the commercial space and not overtaken by the commercial space, and that allows a very free expression of who you are and what you are, rather than being commercially pressured into particular boxes. And I think it then started as an idea originally to create such a space, actually originally very much in an urban environment. But I think then the original people who were involved, and were still involved actually in the Quinta, we sort of figured out fairly quickly that creating community doesn't really work without a holistic look at what community really means. And also without moving maybe a little bit away, this sounds a little bit too much maybe back to the land movement, but in a way, I think it does sound a little bit like, you need to go away a little bit to allow for connection and to allow for expression and to allow for something to grow and to connect with not just other human beings around you, but with other beings around you. And so I think that's how then the Quinta Project became very much sort of an eco-focused at the same time, and expanded sort of from the queer community focus into a sort of more eco-queer focus. And that was certainly my journey into this. So I come from the community focus group.
For me, queer definitely came first. Like as soon as I realized I had a not heteronormative sexuality, it was for me a lot about questioning everything that had to do with this heteronormativity. But this is like over 20 years ago. And then the eco aspect came for me 5 years ago when I had a very personal crisis. It was like my system crashed, and with that, I also started questioning like my urban environment and the, everything that had to do with it. So I was trying to find a way of like, I realized I need to get out of the city, but I really didn't know how, because I always lived in the city, so it's like, but how? So then it led me to permaculture, which was very interesting for me. That was a big paradigm shift in looking at, like, it has the principles, and it helped me a lot in realizing that you can have a different life. And then I guess from there, I started looking for the combination of this queer and ecology. And I have to say there's not so much spaces to go to where you can find them. Actually, well, really very little. So I've been traveling around Europe in the last 2 years, let's say, trying to find these places, and then I ended up in Quinta.
Before I open to the audience, warm up your engines. I would like to ask if you could define the precise tenets of the Quinta. I know that you have a manifesto, I know that it's very dense, we can mildly refer to that, but if you had to sum up what the principles of the type of farming that you do are, I think that would be very helpful. And also, because I don't know, you've just mentioned permaculture, how different or how undifferent is it from organic farming or other types of farming? I think that would be helpful to enlighten. But also, what are your guiding principles when it comes to community making practices? Because you are indeed working in a combination of both. So there's a lot of communal living, communal sharing, communal cooking, communal everything, which I suppose might be initially a little bit challenging, because we've grown as societies. I think we have very individualistic types of social habits, let's say. And so tell us a bit more of what the guiding principles are, so that we are, stepping further and further, closer and closer to life at Quinta.
Yeah, so as you said, we have a manifesto which is very detailed, or fairly detailed, but if you take 2 or 3 really big guiding principles out, I think it's primarily kindness. I think we at least try to be kind. And I think that's also based in a very strong belief, in a very strong view amongst all of us, that there is a unity of all beings. And we're not trying to go into a very spiritual ring with this, but we kind of have this idea that that's very essential because that changes all our relationships to everything. So we are the same as a dog, we are the same as, you know, the frog, the mosquito, and we are in the same category, which is I want. And certainly that changes our relationship to this particular other being. And the other thing I think that is important for us is kind of this community building. And actually that's a forefront consent I would also add into this because I think that has become very clear. Maybe just as a kind of thing, when we're talking about the Quinta, we have to kind of remember we are there for a year now as an actual land project, for 4 years as an online project. And a lot of things have really shifted with actually doing things in practice rather than coming from a very theoretical perspective. And so things, for example, like consent have emerged as a much stronger thing in everyday life and sharing and community building, which maybe kind of were originally not that strong in the online version. So there has been kind of shifts, but I think that those four would really sum up what we base ourselves on. And for the rest, I think we try to avoid being extremely dogmatic. I mean, obviously we do practice permaculture. We have a permaculture pod. We have a permaculture week, and I'm sure we're going to come to that at one stage. We have all kinds of principles, like, for example, the Frank system that we're using in the vegetable garden, is a particular way of planting vegetables so that they both are co-planted as well and companion planted. Companion planted, and then at the same time that they are kind of, you know, kind of like shading each other and kind of doing kind of positive for each other. So we use a whole lot of different things. So we have food forests, for example, which come very much from the permaculture. But on the other hand, we are a very experimental space, and we just try things, and that's also really important for us. And I think there's really a spirit of let's just try and see how this works, and whether that is with relationships or with doing something on the land. We're quite lucky. Our land is quite big. Our aim is not to be a productive farm. Our aim is to be self-sufficient. Is probably a bit of a high aim, but you know, to have a substantial amount of the food come from the farm. And so we have enough space and enough place to experiment. And so that's what we do. And I think a lot of the people that give the fellow Quintas really like it and enjoy it.
So kindness, consent, would you say kinship, and what would be the fourth?
Just community. Like
Community.
Really kind of like
okay, I think that's
thinking of community is an important part.
cool. Go ahead.
I think it like the main idea is relationships and going into relationship with each other and with the land and with the things on the land. And this dynamic of reciprocity, is that the word? Of like taking care and giving and also receiving. And that both goes for the people that are there and the non-humans that are there.
I was very moved when you said that you took care of a tomato for 6 months, and but that doesn't reflect its market value. It absolutely doesn't. But go ahead.
If we can stop thinking about money and market value, it's very different. Because the tomato that you eat from that plant is so delicious. And I mean, who cares if it costs 50 cents or 20 cents in the shop, or if you put so much work into it? I mean, if you can go to the value of the taste and the relationship that you have with the plant, it's fine like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm going to open to the public, so please raise your hands if you have any questions, contributions. Okay. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, like, I suppose like Quinta is here in Portugal. Yeah, like I have two questions. Like, why did you choose Portugal to create this project, and also what are like the big difficulties that you find in this project that you have?
Do you want to go ahead and show the pictures while we talk about that? Stefan,
Yeah, I think
please?
it's a good idea, like to pick up on the question while we're showing or while we're going through the pictures. Because apart from like maybe the weeds, we can come up to that on another one. I think so. Let's see. So one of the things really is so this is the path to the community house, which is sort of in the back there, which you can't really see, but this is the main property, which
Can you help us with the geography?
Yeah, and it's in Mavao, so Porto Alegre district, Alternative. In fact, we're just on the bottom of the hill. So this is the actual main house that you see there. We have 3 structures on the land. The main house, which you can see up on the top, and again here, it's a rather long house. Then one which is a ruin, and one which is a gatehouse. So at the moment, the ruin is obviously not inhabited, but we have, this is mostly inhabitable, so this is kind of 3 houses that form from the farm, or from the project.
Why did you choose Portugal?
I know, and there is a very simple reason for this. It's beautiful, and I was in Portugal when the project started. But also, I think Portugal has a very existing and very good support infrastructure for projects like this. So if you look in particularly central Portugal, there's a whole bunch of other, sometimes smaller, sometimes bigger projects, and simply being located close to it felt very helpful. And I have to be perfectly honest, this place was kind of just magical. I remember going there the first time and kind of just thinking like, okay, this is really a place where we can do what we want to do. But then also later on, again, the community focus and sort of, I think, a very welcoming focus from Portugal sort of helped. Because, for example, we are extremely lucky in this area. We have a whole bunch of different projects which are around us, from really kind of active eco-villages, for example, which are we're just on the border. There's not a very big, but very active eco-village on the other side of the border in Spain. But also we have an alternative forest school, for example, with us. We have sort of a collective where we buy food together in bulk. So it's really easy to make connections with the local community or the existing community in this area, and also support each other. And so I think it's a very unique aspect also. I mean, a lot of the local community, some of it is Portuguese, some of it is foreign. But I think it's a very unique aspect of Portugal, being extremely welcoming to sort of, should we say, weird, wild, and wonderful folk, and being very open to it. And I think that's the experience I certainly had, and I'm kind of a lot of other people have had here. So I guess the answer is it's a welcoming space, and the weather helps, of course. And the difficulties. Exactly. We do have a bit
This
of.
looks very difficult.
Yeah.
These abs look difficult.
It's distractive to have a lot of people. So during this first year at the Quinta, we had up to date 79 people that were there, literally from all over the world. And so sometimes it's difficult to think about going onto the land and doing all the necessary stuff. And it's much more fun to do things like that. But obviously we see there's some serious stuff going on as well. But yeah, I think that there aren't really, difficulties, I wouldn't describe it. I think they're, because we are open to who wants to come. We have people of very different experience. And so sometimes there's maybe more explanation needed and more hand-holding needed, and sometimes there's less hand-holding needed to do what we want to do. And sometimes people are very well versed in kinds of theory and in our background and our kind of philosophy, and sometimes they're a little bit less familiar with it. And also, I think, and again for us, I think it's also an important point. Sometimes people come who really are curious but don't really know much, and so you really get, you know, and actually often sometimes it can be very nice when they kind of realize, for example, there is an alternative to, you know, let's call it kind of the gay social scene somewhere, and it's there. So those are, I'm not sure if you call it challenges, but it's sometimes it's interesting to create it, and you know, you've been there a lot.
Do you want to add a point? No?
Apart from the kitchen, but
The organization of the kitchen is horrible. No, difficulties is also not the word I would use. There's the challenges, of course. But what I like about it, like the fact that we call it an experimental space, means we can try stuff out and like beautifully feel that. Yeah, I think the most challenging part is that we are not used as nowadays humans to live in community. So the social aspect is probably one of the most challenging, but what I liked very much first time I arrived at Quinta is that I had the feeling that there's a real, or the philosophy is that everyone that is coming probably has something to offer, and it's about finding out what that could be, or like what is there, again, the reciprocity, or like what could you bring and what could you receive from it. So that's for me was a very, very beautiful element of it. But it's challenging because it's every time someone is coming, you need to find out like who is this person, what can they can they contribute or want to contribute, or like we have a sharing round every day, and even for some people that are not used to the question of like, how are you, how was your day, how did you feel, is for some people a very, very difficult question to be open about it and to share it with other people. So I think yeah, but then again, Quinta has so many aspects. We will go into the weeks probably.
Yeah,
so there's so many topics that are there that it's very nice to see how very different people are related in very different ways.
And maybe also to add that it's very nice to see how often very different people come in, because as you said, like there is a flux with us. So there's some people who are there longer, then there are some people who are kind of there shorter, and so they come in and then move out. And certainly that was how was this year. But then how you can also create, you know, community in relatively short periods of time, that people really become, you know, and it evolves and it changes, of course, with each participant who leaves or enters. But it creates this kind of space where really deep discussions happen. Like one of my favorite questions is always like, what do you do in the evening? And you know, we have a thing to watch movies, of course, if you want to, and you know, there's some games and things like that. But the reality is, it never happens, because literally we sit around the table. Of course, we have sort of our sharing round, then we tend to have dinner afterwards, and then afterwards, really most of the time, everybody's talking. And so there are sometimes very, very intimate and very, very deep talks happening around the table with everybody from very different people. And that dynamic, when that happens, and it happens a lot, you know, it really brings tears to my eyes, and kind of, you know, I'm sitting there and, you know, you kind of have really deep philosophical talks about how people are living and what they're thinking. And, you know, that there is a space where people also are very vulnerable in what they're sharing with all these other people who they've known for like 3, 4, 5 days. And that thing is, that then is this real, that's where this community is really there. The spirit is there. And so it's, that's kind of it's a super challenge to get to that.
Yeah.
But probably very rewarding.
Yeah.
And we also get to that point, I think, it's not just that we sit around and talk and love each other. It's also because we work together and we cook together and we take care of the place.
You bond over work, which I think is especially foreign to most people who are looking for their LGBTQ crew. They socialize, they may gather in, a drinking parlor, whatever, but they don't usually work together in something that produces something, a living creature. So I imagine that the bonding that happens because of that is especially visceral, I would say.
I don't know what visceral means, but I'm gonna
From
say
the
it.
gut.
Okay. Yeah, it's different, yeah. Than just going to a bar with your friend and having the talk.
More questions from the audience.
Hello, thank you. I have some questions. I couldn't help to think that you're not from Portugal and you are occupying a place where a lot of foreigner projects like permaculturally or ecologically based are based also. How do you feel? And I wanted to ask, in the community you are creating, is there a relation with local queer community? If you think like Porto Alegre, I think it's one of the districts from Portugal with less people, and how is it to grow queer in a place like that, being Portuguese, I mean, and is there a social approach to locals as a how to say welcoming place to be, or if you are if during your work as an ecological project, if being queer in Porto Alegre and working with land isn't it also a privilege that a lot of people that are born in Porto Alegre queer maybe have to go to the city because they cannot reach agro-queer, even if their parents are queer, or if they are born in a agricultural place. And I'm curious if you talked about a lot of nationalities go and meet you, how do they reach your project, and which nationalities are those, and what distinguish your project from other agricultural projects in the region? Yeah, I could ask more, but it's a lot there.
I think that's plenty. Let's see which we can manage.
Okay, yeah, so we're there for a year. And of course the project didn't start as sort of like we want to be a Portuguese project, but we very much are in touch with local communities now on the Porto Alegre side. There isn't that much, but obviously I know local people, and we love to welcome them. So we do have, we had a couple of open days, basically, where we invited local LGBTQ people, identified people. We had sort of a vegetarian potluck. We do work together with LGBT organizations on the other side of the border in Extremadura, so Fundación Triángulo, for example, in Extremadura Entiende. So we try and bridge there a little bit. You are of course right. I think the next question was about privilege. it's important, I think, to notice that we're not a residential community as such, but we offer a lot of workshops, for example. I think we should really come to the workshops.
We will.
And of
So
course,
I'm sure that
experiences.
there's people in the audience eager to know when they can get there, so.
And of course, other kind of experiences, like, for example, coming to us and volunteering with us. And it's important for us, for example, that the workshops, we never ask for money. So whatever you do with the Quinta, there will never ever be anybody asking for any money. Because we want to avoid exactly kind of that somebody cannot come because of money issues. Of course, this isn't a perfect system. You still need to travel. There, and that in itself can be a huge, probably a much bigger obstacle than anything else. In terms of nationalities, online we have people involved literally from Australia all the way to Canada and to the US and to Latin America, and of course a lot in Europe. People who've been on the project from the US, all the way to Israel. I think we're still waiting. South America. Quite a few Germans, quite a few Israelis. I'm trying, my friends. Dutch, Belgian, British, French, Spanish, Portuguese. Yeah, Bolivian, Mexican, US.
Let's get to the specifics. You have a very, very appealing schedule for 2023. Can you talk about those activities being planned? Because some of them might be appealing to our audience, and so let's get to the details, please.
Yes.
So, if you care to tell us, will you be I suspect that you are hosting, but also facilitating or co-facilitating some of these activities. So please let us know.
Yes, we will. Okay. So the way we are organized, and this is kind of where the organizational part comes a little bit into it, is that we have functional pods of little groups which are looking after the houses, for example, after the way we run the vegetable gardens and kind of the gardens around and these kind of things. And then we have thematic pods, like a research pod, for example, permaculture pod, a eco-feminist pod, and eco-sensual pod, and so forth. And so these pods, these kind of smaller groups within our community, are organizing these weeks, and for the most part, for all parts, I think, are also facilitating the weeks. The idea of the week is not necessarily that it is it's certainly not a course, but it's very much a co-created space where people who are interested in the topic come and learn together and create this space together. So it's facilitated by people from the pod, but the actual learning takes place amongst everybody who's there. And really they are pretty much a reflection of what I would say the Quinta is all about in terms of real topics that we occupy. So we're looking in May, we start with We're in Permaculture, which is a week where we're looking at permaculture principles and how they can apply to social permaculture rather than necessarily agricultural permaculture, and how they can apply to the individual, but also, of course, to kind of social ideas. You want to take the floor for the economics?
End of May, there will be an Eco-Feminist Week. Again, yeah, there's the idea of really co-creating with the people that are there, and I will be one of the space holders. And we will be both facilitating the Eco-Sensual Week in July. You want us to go into
Yes.
it a bit?
We want to know all about sexuality or sensuality.
Wow.
No, I mean, I think it would be interesting. You've explained the queering permaculture and how the intention is that you borrow permaculture principles and maybe think of applying them to social interaction and situation. But what would you say is the specifics of the Eco-Feminist Week? Is it a more ritual type of practice? what's it about? And also, if you want to go into the specifics of the Eco-Sensual
Yes.
Week, we're happy to know.
Okay. So for the eco-feminist, I think it's a, what we had this talk often like, eco-feminist, what is it? And you come from the more theoretical approach, but I think it's very important to have it as a lived experience of if we come together with a group of people. It's aimed towards Quinta, so female, lesbian, intersexual, non-binary, trans, and agender. So non-cis males, that means. Like if we come together in a place for a week and we have the intention of having an eco-feminist practice, what does it mean? Or very like, how do we make decisions? How do we talk? How do we work together? So that's for this one. And the eco-sensual is very consciously not called eco-sexual, because we wanted to like take a step back, I think, from the sexuality. Or we realize that when the word sexuality comes in, there's like poo poo poo, so many projections directly being made on what it is. And if we talk about eco-sexually, we can really start from the connection to the self and to the land, or to the elements of the land, and to each other, and then see what evolves from there.
Okay, and if you want to detail the other ones, I think that would be helpful as well.
Yeah, sure. Then we have the Creative Week. So one of the things, we have a very active creative pod, and the members of this pod have already created around the Quinta kind of like small creative things like art projects. Like for example, there is this, which is in a very particular space. It's like suddenly a frame, which kind of reminds you of looking at nature in a particular way. Or you have an olive grove, where all the trees have little QR codes, and you can scan the codes and then listen to ecoqueer writers and their poems in various languages, for example, or writings in various languages. And so the Creative Week is a week where I think that they're basically taking you on a 7-day journey as a community through different senses
Art forms
and different art
yeah.
forms. And so the invitation is for people to come and co-create this creative expression there. The Open Space Week is exactly that. In a way, I think it also goes under the name of the Fun Week at Quinta. It's a bit, the idea is there to have a summer gathering, and everybody can bring what they would like to bring to the space. Again, it goes very much with this kind of co-creating. So whatever topic people may have, and then we will schedule a schedule with the people who are there, and then just have a little bit of everything and a lot of really interesting things. For example, often emerge, I have kind of done a couple of open spaces in other contexts, and often you get to this kind of really crazy things that somebody kind of brings, and you have like, I would never ever think in my life of going to this, but then suddenly it's there and it's on the schedule. And that's the idea with the open space. And then I think, as you've just said, like the Eco-Feminist Week, for example, is very experience embodied week. We also have a very active academic stream and pod of people who are very into academic research. And they are having the Ecoqueer Research Week. Although I should probably say that it's not the intention of this particular pod, is very much to bring theory to people who are practically living it, or sort of in the praxis, and in particular to activists, and also kind of take back and kind of have a dialogue with. So I think there is a big concern within that pod, and I think with the Quinta in general, that ecoqueer theory isn't sitting somewhere in an ivory tower and maybe makes some appearances occasionally in an urban context, but that it really comes to the people who are doing it. And so I think that's the ecoqueer, the dialogue with it, and kind of developing things from there. And that's part of the Ecoqueer Research Week in September.
Okay, I think that's a wonderful introduction. I will take one more question from the audience, but we're really running out of time, so.
When can I come?
Can I? Hello. Sorry. Hello. First, thank you for the project. I was checking online and I can see that you have a really interesting program for the next year. But I kept stuck in the question of you, sorry, I don't know your name, when they asked about the difficulties about the project. And since we unfortunately live in a capitalist system and we have a lot of struggles, as you know, the situation in Portugal is becoming super precarious. One of my questions for you is like how the project sustains itself since the people don't pay nothing, if the land was bought for you, if the land was donated by the municipality. So basically my question is very logistical. I'm from a mountain myself, and I would love in the future to try to experiment some kind of methodologies like this with a collective that I have here in Porto as well. But for me, this part is important as well to understand how this is possible. So this is my very technical question, logistical question
Technical,
about it.
very, very crucial.
Exactly, because we are all trying to do stuff and struggling to do everything. So it will be super nice for me to understand how you manage everything.
Yeah, sure. So the way the Quinta is sort of like legally organized, I guess that's sort of like how what we're aiming for, is that it is a foundation or a trust that holds the land. That one was set up by myself. And then there is an association which we're creating, which is running the programs and is actually maintaining the land. And so the aim is that the association, then, because it has the land, which is held in trust, is donation based, but we do not want to immediately link the donation to, for example, participating. So, because that sort of link we want to break.
Okay.
But yes, there's a sort of a thing of, for example, like if you come, it would be nice if you donate, or if you don't come, it would be nice if you donate. But, it would always be nice if you donate, but in a way, we don't want to say like, okay, you come now, pay 30 euros or whatever it is. So that's sort of the legal section. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's sort of it.
Not really. Sorry. Sorry. But yeah. My question is like, okay, the volunteers go, like the land sustains itself by the people that work volunteering, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like I believe that you have your own vegetables and fruits and things, and this is a part. And okay, and I was trying to understand. So everything basically was built by an investment fund, and then it's running by volunteering and changing activities.
Exactly.
I think it's this.
Yeah, and so everything that's physically there, so to speak, owns itself. So the land and farm owns itself and cannot be doing anything else other than doing this association, and there's the association just runs it. And that is then where, for example, things like ongoing costs where you can come from the association, but they are then based on the donations the association gets.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
But there was a personal investment of buying the.
Yeah. Okay, that was of course. Someone's need to.
Without wanting to pry too much, can you give us like an estimate of what a doable investment would be, or a necessary type of investment would be? And obviously the land prices vary from place to place in the country, but what would you say kind of was that investment?
Are you asking about the Quinta specifically?
Just
I mean, the Quinta specifically is a fairly high investment because we are also making everything so that it has no more bills to pay, so that everything for us is now off-grid. But I know, it's sort of like, how long is a piece of string question.
yeah.
I see people who are doing amazing work. And I know it sounds a little live with them, but like, maybe kind of like for a very low sum of like, say 10,000 euros or so.
Yeah.
Maybe who have family ownership of some land somewhere. Like for example, I know of one project where it is like the grandparents' place, and it's going very slowly, but really lovely in sense with permaculture principles. It's actually going really, really slow, building slow solutions, but over 3 or 4 years. That particular project I'm now thinking of, for example, has built on quite an interesting set of things that are happening around there. And I think of course it's a question of money, but there's also, I think, a lot of question of love and of other people and of community. And I think one of the overwhelming experiences from the Quinta is that there is a community out there to help you. And I think that's an important point also to note, that if you have these projects and you have this community around it, there will be people who will come and help you.
I think as a final question I would ask, because I assume that some of us would be interested in knowing, are you available for some sort of mentoring? Like, I have the idea, I'd like to come up with a project, can I come to Quinta, stay for a week, can you give me the tips? Can you tell me, where I might get stuck in the bureaucracy? Can we like multiply this project, even if it's not as ambitious as yours is? But would you be willing? Are you willing? Are you planning on mentoring people who get there?
So we don't have the idea of having a mentoring program which is formal, but maybe it's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Maybe in a couple of years when we're actually existing for a couple of years, so we know more. I think it has been kind of a lot of learning also for us. But yes, of course the answer is yes. We would love. We have, for example, 2 people who are living very close to us. One of whom has bought land because we are there. Another person has already been in the area and is very much sort of, I think she would kill me if I say kind of an extension of the Quinta Project by now, but is really sort of our kind of, if we don't have space, sometimes volunteers from us go to her, and so we it's like, we're not the same project, but we are very similar. And yes, of course, if any of you has the wish to have a project, or even not, just to visit, we are available, you can come. We normally have a kind of program, which is the volunteer program, where you come for a week, around a week, or maybe longer sometimes, and stay there. And then, of course, I'd love to kind of talk about how you can do it and help you do it. Because for me in particular, if we have 30, 40, 100 little eco-queer spaces around Portugal and Spain and all around the world, amazing. And we do work together with other eco-queer spaces, trying to set up a network, so that hopefully we can immediately also guide you to the others and kind of be like, well, that's the intention a bit of the network, that we also work together to exactly kind of have that knowledge, and also maybe kind of to link people to other spaces and say, look, this is even more in your area, or that's how they have done it, and to have that knowledge, because we know how we've done it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's applicable to you.
What I wanted to add is, what I think is very clever in Quinta is that you had the group that wanted to support it first, and then after you bought the space and set up the physical project. But I think that's a very good approach to it, to like gather the people around first that have the knowledge and have the interest and that want to contribute, and then like not the other way around. You are like running around building a land, buying the land, and then like, oh, I need people to help me with it.
Yeah.
It's a very sustainable way of doing it.
Yeah, and a good point. Yes, the point I didn't think of, but yes, exactly. Yeah, because if I look at the people who've been there, the vast majority has been in contact with
us for quite some time. And then come and sort of like, yes, now it's there. Now let's build this, that, and the other on that, or do this.
Stefan, Griet, it was lovely to have you here. Can I have a warm hand of applause for our guests? I'm sure we can keep this conversation going, but they'll find you online and hopefully they'll come and meet you in person. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. See you soon.